Hello, Sharon. How are you today?
I'm absolutely lovely. Thank you very much. Looking forward to this.
I know, I'm so excited about this one. Welcome to everybody. And in this episode, we're going to be discussing our inspirations, where our passions come from, our inspirations and our influences. So yeah, there's a lot to go through on this one. I'm really excited. So shall we get started?
Absolutely, yes.
Now, I think the first thing we need to tell everybody is exactly where you and I met. And it was long before we were doing all of this stuff. And it wasn't until quite some time after we got to know one another again that it kind of dawned on me where we had first met. So what were you doing at the time, Sharon?
Well, this was pre-Justin, pre my son. We're going back rather a long time, aren't we?
Oh.
And I don't really know when. So it must have been somewhere in the mid to late 80s, I reckon. It had to be. It had to be. Okay. And at that stage, I used to cook, and I made jams and jellies and pickles and chutneys for farms and delicatessens, butchers. If you go to your local farm around here and you pick up a jar of jam, that was me. Yeah. And I called myself What a Pickle, because I just always seemed to be in one.
I think that's just a brilliant name for what you were doing.
I was always in a pickle because the house was just full of jars and full of fruit, and we had three freezers full of fruit at the time. And I used to do lots and lots of fairs and events and exhibitions around the countryside, and they would be anywhere, in church halls, villages, sports centres, all the craft fairs we used to do. And we think we know that's where we very first met.
Well, shall I say how I recall it, and then you can tell me if you remember it at all. You probably don't even remember.
I don't
at all.
No.
But my recollection is we were in a marquee show somewhere. Can't remember exactly where. Probably southeast Kent, Essex, somewhere sort of that part of the UK. It was a marquee show, and we had this long marquee, and I was down one side of the marquee about halfway down, and your stall was right by the entrance. And just outside the entrance, there was a little coffee van. And I used to toddle up and down the marquee from time to time, go out and have a coffee. And at one point, I was standing there waiting for my coffee, and you came up behind me and we got chatting. And you said, oh, I've seen you walking past a few times. What stall are you on? And we got chatting. And at that point, you said, I'm thinking of doing something similar. And we had this conversation, and I remember you saying about that you loved fantasy art, but that wasn't all that you did, but that was where your leaning was towards at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember your hair. I distinctly remember your hair. And we had this conversation for probably 10 minutes or so. And for the rest of the weekend, we'd wave and say hi to one another. We were at different ends of a marquee, so we weren't sort of standing and chatting all the time. And that was it. And it wasn't till years later, and I think you made some comment about you having done the jams. And I was thinking, that's you! And that's where we first met.
Isn't life just bizarre like that? Where were you living at that time? I was just down the road in Whitehill in Hampshire. Where were you?
We were in Hertfordshire at the time. So I was kind of doing anything that I could get to around the M25. So it could have been anywhere around that M25 band. So, yeah, I don't know. But it is amazing that when you there was a little trigger of something that made me think, I remember something here, and it took a while to kind of click into place. But
isn't that incredible? I gave all that up when we moved here.
Okay.
Because we moved here when my lad was just 8 months old, and I wanted to just start again and just be a mum. So I decided to forget all about that. And of course, boiling hot jam at 130 degrees C is a bit dangerous around youngsters.
With a baby, yeah. So how old is Justin now?
29.
Crikey. Yes.
Yeah. So
that's how life changes.
Yes. But how strange. I often think to myself, years and years ago, I went to a concert at Earl's Court, 1975 it was ish, and we saw Led Zeppelin there. And in the interim years, the number of people that I have met who have said, we were there. And you know,
wow.
if you only stand there at that time and say to a room full of 60,000 people, I don't know how many people, and say to them all, put your hand up if I'm going to meet you in a future life. Wouldn't it be interesting, really?
That would be fascinating. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, going back to what inspired us both, I was listening to your episode of Sharon Talks Art, and you were talking about how your mum was painting, and you'd come home and she'd be in the kitchen with chaos all around her. So do you want to just give us a little reminder of that? Because I've got a mum story and it's similar, different, but similar. So if we start off there, that would be wonderful.
Our lives are quite parallel, aren't they, really?
Yeah.
Well, my grandmother was always arty and crafty, because I remember the mirrors in the house had all been hand painted by my grandmother, and she wore beautiful, beautiful clothes that had been hand embroidered. And my mum obviously picked up from there as well, because mum tried everything. You know, in my years at home, she tried everything. And she was a peculiar character, because as soon as she had kind of achieved what she wanted to learn, that was it. She was fed up with it, and she didn't bother with it anymore. And art was very much like that. So she went through this whole phase. There was a teacher on TV called Nancy Kaminsky, and mum used to watch the programs, and then she bought the book and bought all the oils, and she had a go. And you know, she was really, really very, very good at it. And from there, I suppose, like most mums, I'd come home and she'd say, come on, you have a go too. Here's the stuff, you paint with me. And of course, doing things like that with our parents are special times, aren't they?
Very special memories, absolutely, yes. Yeah,
you know,
very much so.
What happened with your mum then?
Okay, well, my story, it has a happy ending, but it has a little bit of a sad bit in the middle. My mum used to paint, and she was mostly into her oil painting. And I've got a couple of her paintings around, but they're not in very good condition anymore. So I need to kind of do a little bit of work to preserve them, really. But she used to do oil painting, and it was something she did before she had my sister and myself. And she didn't do so much of it after, you know, we came along. I don't remember seeing her much sitting and painting, but the occasional painting would appear. So she obviously did it when we were at school or when we were out. But she always encouraged us to draw and to be as creative as we wanted to be. But when I got to a point, I remember probably middle of junior school, where I started painting and drawing more. And clearly there was a spark there when I was painting and drawing. So my teachers would get me to do the drawings for the posters on the walls. And, you know, my friends would ask me to draw cartoons for them, copy things out of magazines. And I used to love doing all of that. And I remember her one day saying to me, she put her paints away, she put them in the wardrobe, and she said, "It's your thing now." And I was heartbroken that she wouldn't do it. And she stopped painting for a couple of decades, probably. Didn't paint anything at all. She put her oils away. She said, "No, you're better than me. It's your thing now." And I always felt incredibly guilty that I'd stopped her doing something that she had clearly loved doing. And then, how long ago? Probably 25 years or so ago. I said to my dad, I said, "Look, I still feel guilty about mum not painting." At that point, neither of us had done any watercolor. She'd done oils. I was doing oils, the occasional acrylic, but that was kind of where my thing was. So I said, "Right, Dad, I'd like you to buy me a watercolor weekend for my Christmas present, and I'm going to buy the same watercolor weekend for mum, and we're going to go together." And neither of us had done watercolor, so it was new to both of us. And we went off and we did this weekend with Ron Ransom. I don't know if you remember him. Yeah. And he did he was probably one of the pioneers of the how-to video. You know, he was one of the early adopters of that. So we went down to his place down in Gloucestershire for a weekend, and we learnt the basics of watercolor together. And she never stopped painting to the end of her life.
Oh, bless her.
So that was wonderful. And she sold, and she was wonderful. But when we get on to a couple of other things in a minute, there was a couple of instances when we came back from that and we were trying different things and we were exposed and we were just in fits of laughter at how awful we were, but also how much fun it was.
Yeah.
And we developed from there. So yeah, my mum's story is slightly different from you, but she did always paint, and she is the one who made me feel I could do it.
Yeah.
No matter how good or bad or whatever stage you're at, she was the one that made me feel, yeah, I could do this if I want to and if I enjoy it, which I loved. She made me feel I could do it. So I thank you, Mum.
Yeah, absolutely. Mothers are precious, aren't they? Mine was my in her latter years. So when she was 70s going into her 80s, the biggest joke was that she used to say that she was the oldest roadie in the business because she used to come with me to my demos, because it was an outing, wasn't it? You know, somewhere to come with me. And she used to sell my bits and pieces. And she was my biggest fan, you know, and we had this double act going because she'd be at the back of the room. And, you know, if she got up to go outside and get a breath of fresh air, I'd make some witty comment down the back of the room, you know, like, can't you take it anymore? And everybody would turn and look to see what was going on. And yeah, she was just wonderful from that point of view. And she'd say to me halfway through, "You've forgotten that bit." And everybody would look like this.
Good old mums, keeping it real.
Yeah. So yeah.
But you know what?
Marvelous.
Sadly, I lost my mum 12, 13 years ago. But I know that if she'd have been around, she would have come with me to my demos. She came to a few with me at the beginning, and then she wasn't very well. But she would have been my roadie had she been there. So yeah, they sound quite alike, and I think they would have got along extremely well.
Absolutely, they're roadieing up in heaven now, I think.
They are. Hopefully, they're cheering us on.
My mum will be up there saying to God, "Don't do it like that. Do it like this."
You've missed a bit. Oh, we've got to love them, haven't we?
Yes, very much so. They made us who we are, didn't they?
Oh, totally. I wouldn't be here without my mum at all.
Yeah.
And you know, while we're talking about that, I also want to give a shout out to my husband Tim, because he has enabled me to do what I do. He worked shift work. He was in the police. So me doing a regular job when the children were growing up was very difficult. So my art fitted very easily around what I was doing. But you know what it's like, you don't earn a good living doing this. And he was incredibly supportive and said, you know, do what you need to do because you're supporting me because of my shift pattern. Yeah.
That's true, isn't it? Nick was very much the same, actually, although he had a bit of a nasty shock. When I was in my early to mid 40s, I was unlucky enough to have cancer, and that completely changed my life. And the person that I was didn't walk out the other end of it. Right. And I became somebody else who decided that they wanted to do this with their life instead. And to hell with the consequences, really. And this poor man kind of stood back and looked suddenly and thought, what's going on? You know, I changed the way I dressed, the way I walked, everything about me changed. And of course, it was a shock. And he stood by me and let me get on with it. So same applies. So ditto, two lovely men.
Oh, they're wonderful. Well, you know, me doing what I did was never going to be easy. In terms of finances, you don't earn a great deal doing what we do. There's very few people who make fortunes out of this, but I think we're rich in other ways.
Yes, I mean, if I consider that I can get somebody else out there painting and create some inspiration in somebody else, that's what today is all about, isn't it? Showing people what inspired us and hoping that it might spark that little match that lights the candle, that lights the conflagration and becomes something completely different. Yes,
absolutely. So where do we go from here? I would quite like to show, I've got a couple of paintings of my mum's that I can show you. Did you have anything of your mum's that you can show?
Yes, I do, yes.
Yeah, do you want to show it?
So this is one of Mum's photographs, and you can see, like yours, Denise, the damage to the poor old because it's been stored in her garage for probably nearly 25, 30 years. Yes. And whatever was on the front of it the back of whatever was on the front of it has stuck to the picture. So I'm going to have to do something about that, I think. If anybody's got any ideas, I'd be very grateful. I confess to having had to put a wet cloth all over it. Now let me show you another.
Are these oils, Sharon?
Yes, this is they're all oils, and this is another. Mum loved America. She'd never been, but she loved anything American and Red Indians, and she knew her American history back to front and sideways. And this again, the colours are just stunning, aren't they?
Yeah, no, that is.
She was a good artist, you know.
She really was, yes. I need to now go and look for a couple of paintings of my mum's, having seen those, because it's reminded me of some of the things. She did some beach scenes, so maybe that's where I got my love of the water from. But yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then I just want to show you a picture of Mum, if that's all right.
Of course, I'd love to see her.
There you go. So there she is in all her glory, my mum.
Isn't that a beautiful picture of her? What a lovely lady.
Yeah, nice day out that was. So there you go. That's my mum. Now let's have a little look at yours.
Okay. Here we have Mum, and like you, my mum, both my parents loved America, and they used to go out to Florida regularly, to the point that they had friends there, and they used to stay in the same motel, and she would do paintings of the scenes around the area, and they'd have them in the reception to sell. And every time she went on holiday, they'd present her with an envelope of
oh wow, that's lovely.
So, yeah, she used to go out, dine out on lobsters, she said, based on her paintings.
And beautiful crab out there as well, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's my mum. So this was Mum towards the latter part of her life. She got into her watercolours. So I've got a couple of her watercolours here.
Oh, that's lovely.
And she very much took the inspiration from the Ron Ranson, from the way he taught, and his inspirations. So these are all sort of, I think, Florida based. So we've got this one here with a couple on the beach. Whoops. Go back quicker. So we've got this one again of some boats on the beach. And I think she did very well at these big skies, because the space is not always easy to do in watercolour.
No, you're right there. Gosh.
So we've got that one. And then we also have...
Oh, I love that.
This one of this sort of estuary. This, I don't think this is Florida. This is, I don't know where this one came from, but I just love this one. I've got this one up at home.
Very soft colours, nice palette, isn't it?
Yeah, very delicate.
Yeah, Naples yellow and French ultramarine, and yeah, it's nice. Yeah, like it.
So that was Mum's watercolors. So yeah, no, I was very proud of her, and also, you know, like I said, I was quite disheartened by the fact that I'd stopped her painting, but pleased that I got her starting again. Yeah.
That's a funny thing, that, isn't it? Because my lad, when he was young, could draw ambulances and police cars like nobody else I know.
Wow.
All the perspective, you know, from a big front to foreshortening. He was just so good at it all. And it's almost as though he put his pencils down when he left school and said, "I'm not doing that anymore. That's your thing."
It's weird, isn't it? My son was more into his 3D. He loved his Connects. I don't know if you remember Connects.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. And the construction thing. But it had to work. He couldn't just make something that looked a bit like something. He had to make it work. And I remember him one day coming down, and he had this photograph of the Eiffel Tower. And he said, "Come up to my room, Mum, and see what I've done." And he'd made this like 4-foot version of the Eiffel Tower from the photograph, and it was absolutely wonderful. And he's now an engineer.
Oh, well, there you go then. Yes.
It's just, it's in them, isn't it?
Yeah,
Something is
I
in
agree
them
with
that
you.
they want to do, and obviously with Justin as well now, with the ambulances.
Yeah, very true. Gosh, I don't know. All these little things that all come together to make you the person that you are, and the whole thing, you know. And sometimes it doesn't come out until much later, does it? When for me, it was just one day thinking, oh, what are we going to do? You know, we're bored today. He's 5 years old. Where are we going to go from here? And got the paints out. Paints that had been sat in the cupboard for, you know, years and years. And then being ill as well, it just kind of kicked it all into touch. But hey.
But you're all well now?
Yeah, touch wood, thank you very much.
Yes, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So moving on, I'm looking at the picture over your shoulder, and I know there is a tale to tell about an inspiration there. We're going to go on to other things in a minute, but whilst we've got that over your shoulder, I would like to ask about young Luke.
Right, well, the young gentleman over my shoulder here, he is one of my son's friends, and his name is Luke Erkut Oates, an actor and a model. And this young man one Sunday walked into my house, and I took one look and just knew I just had to paint it. You know, it's unequivocal. You know, when you look at something, whether it's a flower or a dog or a pet or a person, and you just look at them and you think, I got to do that. You know, it creates these images in your head. So I created, well, actually we created between us, two whole personas. I had been painting Wanda, so she's my sort of bit of a dopey witch, young girl, gets everything wrong. If it can go wrong, it will. Yes. And then we sat down, the two of us, not Wanda, you understand, Luke, and discussed her life and the pictures I'd been painting, and decided that Wanda would have a bit of love interest. And so this is where all this comes from. So I started painting the two of them together. I did their meeting and how they got on, and you know, the escapades they got up to. And Wanda has a pet cat called Ghost, and a spider in her chopsticks that she keeps in her hair, and the spider's called Spectre. And Luke decided that he wanted a moth that he could wear on his outfit that would change colour with each different outfit that he wore. And the moth is called Engel. So these are all names that he came up with. But I can show. Sorry.
Yeah, how wonderful having that story and having Luke being involved and having an input into the painting. And I'm sure that must inspire you, doesn't it?
I'm lucky. I mean, ideally one day, he's classically trained, he's studied classics at uni, and he's a writer himself, and some of the stories that he can create, I would love to be able to paint and have him put the story to the paintings and to produce a book with these things. So I mean, this is just,
I'm sure you will
do it. Yes. But I've got some other pictures here if you'd like to see the man in the flesh rather than not literally.
I'm sure. Yes. Well, I'd love to, Sharon.
I'll show you some pictures.
Okay. There he is.
So here you have the man himself. He's currently working out in Spain on one of the world's largest entertainment shows. He's a pirate. So how cool is that? And I can
see him being that.
Yes, absolutely. I have another photograph that I can show you as well, another picture of a painting. And so here you have another picture that I've painted. He's with the cat, and you can see the spider in the tree, and he's created this little spell because he's a wizard himself, and the spell has created a gust of wind which has blown the cat from the branch and nearly blown the spider out of the tree. Every single picture I have tells a story. I just believe in it firmly that it needs to have a story.
That's wonderful. Again, it's just so evocative. of it's just evocative of the tale, of the scenario, of the people involved. So yeah, no, that's fab.
So what stimulates your imagination? What do you paint the sea, you love it, don't you? You love the water. So have you
water. Well, and I like all the moods of the water as well. So I do like going down to the beach. As you know, we've moved up to the Norfolk-Suffolk border, and we're not far from the coast. So I go down to the beach as frequently as I can, and I cannot wait to get my paints back and go and be able to sit on the beach again and paint in situ. I think out there, outside, is so impressive, so inspirational. Light impresses me, colour impresses me, Mother Nature impresses me, and I just want to see if I can do it. Do you know what I mean? Do it justice. The older I've got and the more experienced I've got, the less I want to be really critically detailed.
Yeah.
And the more I want to be expressive. A little bit more impressionistic, and the Impressionists were one of my inspirations, which we will get on into in a few minutes. But I like that sort of the shimmer of light and colour, but I also now like more texture and a more painterly quality to it as well. And maybe that's just my changing passions. As you play with paint more, you like the paint to have a say too. So yeah, very much so.
Have you got some pictures you can show us? Oh, that's lovely. Oh God. Right, go on.
So this is one of my paintings. My favourite part of the sea is where the sea and the land interact. So you've got the sand, you've got the water, you've got the air, and they're all kind of melding together. And that's the bit I find fascinating, where you get those rows of bubbles and the foam
God,
on the edge.
Denise, that's fantastic. You've got three elements there, haven't you? Earth, water, and air. Oh, it's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I do love that. Do you know, it's the wisps of white on the water on the beach. What do you call that? Do you know what you call that?
Well, to me, it's the froth, it's the air, it's the froth.
It's just gorgeous.
I suppose to me, I kind of think of it as lace work.
Yeah.
Nature's lace.
Yeah. And the translucency you've got in the water is just gorgeous. You could almost see through it.
Thank you. Shall I find another one for you?
Please.
So this is a very different one. This is, again, it's that shore edge. But living on the East Coast, we often get these coffee-coloured seas. And I know they're traditionally not, as glamorous as the turquoise seas that you see, but I still think they're fantastic. They're really,
the light's good. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can see the lights, shimmering on. I like the idea of coffee-coloured water, though.
Yeah.
That's a good way to describe it. I know what you mean. I mean, that's the colour the Thames is. The spume is good on that one, the top of the waves where you've got the flicks.
Thank you.
That's a nice effect. Yeah.
So,
Denise, guess who I've got here as a guest star for the afternoon?
Okay, show me.
Look what I've got.
Oh, is that a picture plant?
Yeah, it is. It's one of my carnivorous plants, and it's a clever little devil because it grows these pitchers, and they're actually full of it's water, but it's water plus, because this is where they trap flies and digest the flies to feed themselves. And these little hats on the top stop the water from getting in when it rains in the tropics. But these, I collect all sorts of weird and wonderful plants. I just love strange plants. And in fact, you're talking to the woman who's just expecting a new greenhouse to arrive any minute for a big Edgar.
Specifically for your weirdos?
Yes. And so you see, these wonderful plants give me the opportunity to have a sit in a drawer, but I don't necessarily draw them the way I'm looking at them. I kind of build them up and create my own. And these have become known over the years as my weirdos. Would you like to see one?
I would love to. Yes, please.
So here we are. This is one of my strange plants. This is probably about, it's not A4, so it would be A5 maybe. And I've done with ink tints. So it's a watercolor pencil, which is ink rather than paint and pigment. But I just enjoy greatly taking the shape of something and creating something quite bizarre with it.
It's wonderful. It's that kind of fantasy. You can see there's an element where you've taken it from a real plant, but then you've kind of let it develop and evolve into its own thing. Isn't that fun?
Yeah, and I like them to have to grow feathers sometimes, or they've got leaves that are feathers and strange bits and pieces on them. I like that kind of dichotomy. It's fun.
Sharon's Imaginarium.
Yeah, I like that too. Yes.
Indeed, indeed. So taking this back a little way further, what TV programs did you watch as a child that were art-based that inspired you?
Oh gosh, I think like most artists, I absolutely adored Vision On. Yes.
Vision On was fabulous.
And loved Tony Hart and Morph.
Yep.
And that little plasticine creature. I mean, Nick Parks nowadays, think about it, but for goodness sake, he was the forerunner, wasn't he? And I wasn't so much a Blue Peter girl, because I found that was more crafts and making things. But I loved Magpie on the other side, because they were much more arty.
Yep, I was a Magpie girl, definitely.
Yeah.
There aren't enough arty programs on the TV, I don't think. I mean, as you know, I took part in the Landscape Artist of the Year with Sky Arts, and that's fabulous. Would you remember Watercolor Challenge?
Oh, I loved that. And Hannah Gordon.
Yes.
That was so gentle and soft, wasn't it? There was no great criticism like, dare we mention Daphne?
Yes.
You know, there was no great criticism, and nobody was made to feel awkward or difficult or forced to create something in a particular style that would please the judges. They all went out and they did their own thing, and everybody got a bit of praise for it, didn't they? I just loved the gentleness of it.
And I think it inspired so many people
to
go out and paint.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Definitely an inspirational program.
Yeah, lovely program actually. But that cry of there's not enough art in that respect on TV, it's a teeny bit better, because we've got Grace and Perry on, haven't we? Yes. And the landscape artists, and they've been doing the portrait, and we've got the pottery sling down, haven't we?
Yes.
Sorry, throw down. But you try politely throwing a bit of pottery on a wheel. It's more like a chuck it, isn't it? My goodness.
It's quite hard to centre a piece of pottery. You've never tried it. Oh,
gosh, yes. Yeah, pottery throwdown sounds so sort of nice and, but it isn't.
No, it is improving. But I don't think they've quite hit the Watercolor Challenge, just hit the right note.
Yeah, didn't it, just with so many people? Yeah.
And I have to say, I do like Landscape Artist of the Year, and I cannot say how pleased I am that and the portrait is now on terrestrial, so we don't have to.
So jump through hoops to try and find a way to watch it. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I think
I agree. Yeah.
Yes. Well, what about books then? What books have you loved?
It's interesting, everybody, because yesterday Denise and I were chatting on Messenger, and both saying that, in preparation for this, we had been going through our bookshelves to see what we had. And I have to admit, I was exactly the same as you. And you said to me, I've had a lovely afternoon going through my books. And so have I. And, here they are sitting next to me. I've found all my books that really, really I love. Having that in my hand, I may as well show you.
Yes, please do.
She's one of my favourites.
Okay.
She's absolutely, it's so edgy. This is hilarious. It's about the witch who has been thrown out of work And so she lives in a chapel, a deconsecrated chapel, with a vampire who's sworn off blood, and a vegetarian vampire,
Yes.
and a pixie, and they're all private investigators. And the pixie lives in the hoop of her, or sits in the hoop earrings underneath her hair to stay warm and to listen to everything that's going on. Fabulous.
Well, do you know what? When you first picked that book up, I was thinking, oh, I've gone for painting books that I was inspired by. And I was thinking, oh, God, did I do the wrong thing? Should I have done other things? But I can absolutely, when you describe that book, see how that's influenced and inspired what you do. Totally. So, yeah, there's no reason why it has to be one thing or another.
So you've gone for art books, have you?
I've gone through my art book collection for things that have inspired me. And
what have you got there then?
The first one is this one. It's called How to Make a Watercolor Paint Itself by Nita, Engel. And this book is all about, I haven't got any particular pages to thrust up, but it's all about throwing paint on the paper and then seeing what happens. And I've got a picture I'd like to show you in just a second of my mum. Now, when we got back from our weekend away with Ron Ransom, we decided to have a couple of days in the summer in the garden, and we decided, let's get this book and we'll see what we can do. And it involved taking your paper down and pouring paint and pouring water and tipping. We had to do it in the garden. There was so much mess everywhere. And then seeing what you could make from this. And I cannot tell you how much we laughed. And I'm going to find a picture now.
Oh dear. I'm looking at your mum.
Can you see my mum? This is how I remember my mum from when we were doing these painting sessions in the garden. I mean, literally, we were crying with laughter. So that was that.
Messy?
Sorry?
Did you get terribly messy?
Yes, incredibly messy. There was paint everywhere. There was probably more paint on us on the patio and on the grass than there was on the painting.
On the paper, yeah.
And we had no idea what we were doing, but we really, really enjoyed it.
We did.
So there was Mum. So yeah, that was a book that I thoroughly enjoyed working from. And another one, again, this is based on the Ron Ransom weekend, was Learn Watercolor the Edgar Whitney way. Now, Edgar Whitney taught Ron Ransom to paint.
Okay.
And this book, for me, has always been, there's things that he does in here. He puts these little quotes throughout the book. And let me just read a couple of them. No talent can survive the blight of neglect.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Ooh, yes.
Art is rational. If you follow the laws, you produce a good painting. If you break the laws, it's a bad painting. Although my only rule is that there are no rules. So, you know.
I was going to say, I might disagree with that.
Yes. Courage is grace under pressure.
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
Unity in a painting is everything.
Yeah.
You get facts from nature, but you get art from artists.
Yes, yes.
So the whole book is full of little things like that. And Edgar Whitney also came up with the Mama Papa Baby, which I still think about when I'm doing a painting. So he's got this Mama Papa Baby. And apparently there is a way that he used to tell this, which is not very politically correct. So I'm going to give you the incorrect version first, and then what I think should be more appropriate. The baby is the center of attention. So that's your focal point, but it's also the smallest thing. The mama is there to support the baby, and she's guiding your attention to the baby. And the papa is the large thing in the background that doesn't do anything. But I think the politically correct way of saying that is Papa is in the background and is the largest area, but is the supporting cast.
He's being very supportive. That's a lovely way to remember something, actually. Going to try and lock that in, because
I thought that was a little key thing that I thought was amazing.
Oh, yeah. quite important, really, isn't it? I agree with that. Yes, totally.
And although this was years ago, that has really stuck with me. That sort of mama, papa, baby trio of thinking about it.
Absolutely, all those little things.
Yes.
It's funny, you being terribly sensible here, I've just scarpered up to the bookshelf and grabbed this.
Okay.
Because this is
David Bellamy. What a fantastic artist.
Ultimate hero, this is. I've followed him from day one with book number 1, and I have every book and story that goes with this particular little jaunt. Every book, okay? So there's a shelf full of them up there. And many years ago, Mum and I decided that we were going to treat ourselves to a David Bellamy painting, going to have one. And we trotted off to an exhibition. He was here in Petersfield and he had an exhibition, and we trotted along with our checkbooks in our purse. And I said, oh, I'll take a book and get him to sign my book. And my mum said to me, my mum being my mum, no, you're not, take every one of them. But Mum, I've got about 10. She said, take everyone. She said, you've been his greatest supporter and you bought all these books. The least he can do is sign them. Oh, my poor man. So I took these books and I can remember standing there with 2 carry bags and said, creeping to him, and said, oh, please, will you sign my books? I mean, totally and utterly starstruck. I just, I just love his artwork. And, God bless him, he stood there and he signed every book. And somehow he managed to find something different to say in every single one. And I love him for it. So shout out to David Bellamy. That's for you. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's lovely. And his artwork is incredible.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yes, books, art, books and books, really. I couldn't imagine my house without a book.
Well, I have to say, I lost several hours yesterday afternoon just getting a couple of books off the shelves. So, I haven't looked in this one. And they're like old friends coming round for a cup of tea, which is just wonderful. And I've got a big pile of them here. I'm not going to go through them all. But, there's things like this is another one that I really like.
I've got that
Good book, isn't it? Yeah. So, I think sometimes it's about trying to take you outside your comfort zone, but also sometimes it's about saying it's endorsing what you're doing and saying, actually, you're doing something right. So it's a bit of both of those, really, in my opinion. Yeah. And I also know that you find music very, very important.
Yes, I can't paint without it. It's quite interesting that years ago when our art society used to go out and paint outside, and I found that I was struggling like mad because I couldn't do it. I was sit there and inspiration was just somewhere else because I didn't have it. Okay. And it took me a little while to work out what the problem was, and it was because I was sitting there in the quiet and I didn't have any music, and I never work without it, not at all, not ever. And I discovered that as soon as I plugged my ears in and I was taking something with me to listen to, that was it. I was off.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, but it's not just that. It's the words of songs have inspired so many paintings. It's just a phrase sometimes. There's one I've been listening to, and he says, I have a son, his name is Evening. And immediately I sit up and think, Evening, what would he look like? Would he have this dark hair? Would he have dark eyes? What would he be wearing? Who is he? What's he doing? And suddenly the story starts to weave, and I create it that way. But
as soon as you say that description to me, dark hair but with a grey beard.
Yes, Evening, as in age of his life. Yes, entirely. There's another one I've been listening to recently, and he says she met a blue-eyed witch man and they ride white horses. And that's just brought me out in goose pimples. I just need to do that. Yes, my problem there is working out how you get close enough to his face to see the colour of his eyes, whilst you understand that he's got a woman in the saddle in front of him and they're riding a white horse. So it's all those issues rolled up. But would you like to see a picture that I've painted?
Yes, I would love to. Yes, please.
Of you. So this one is called When You're Falling, and it is Peter Gabriel and the Afro-Celt sound system. And this was inspired just by the first verse, where it says, "Every day you crawl into the night, a fallen angel with your wings set alight. When you hit the ground, everything turns to blue, and I can't get through the smoke that's surrounding you." And so I just wanted this angel in free fall with her wings alight and her being almost oblivious to all of it. So I like things
really inspiring
with a bit of an edge. And then we have this one. So people would initially look at that and think, oh, it's two blokes cuddling each other, you know, maybe I don't want to do that. But this was a song by the Alan Parsons Project, and it was called Brother Up in Heaven. And it was inspired by them as musicians, by a true story. And this was the start of the Afghanistan war. Twins, and one brother was sent out to Afghanistan as a fighter pilot and was shot down by friendly fire. And it's the loss of the other brother who is still at home saying, "Brother up in heaven, please wait up for me." Oh. So it's very
heartbreaking and beautiful.
Yes. And so I wanted that feeling of the terrible loss of the brother in the genes. And unbeknownst to him, really, the other brother is actually there as the angel, still hugging him and saying, "It's all right, I will see you again."
Oh, that is so stunning. That is absolutely beautiful.
So that's me and my music.
Yes. Well, I often listen to music, and there's certain things. I have a really eclectic range of music that I like, from, you know, Adele to Ed Sheeran to Bring Me the Horizon, which is really quite out there, to classical music, to, you know, anything in between, and some people that, you know, that are less well known. I still listen to CDs. I've got a record player in the corner where I listen to vinyl. I have CDs as well. And I do listen to music when I go out and paint. But what I find I often do when I'm particularly painting outside, and like you, I find the silence really loud. Really strange way of putting it, but it's overpoweringly loud. So I often listen to audiobooks when I'm painting outside. And for me, what that does is it allows me to focus on the story of what's going on in the book that I'm listening to, sorry. And I let the painting do its own thing. And what it means to me is I'm not focused too much on it. I'm not thinking too hard. And the more I think, the more I find my work gets tight. So the more I sort of step back from that and I'm focused on something else, the more it just happens.
You don't find it distracts you?
Yes, and that's the point. It does distract me, and that's the point. I want it to, because I want it to, you know, that becomes an automatic reflex.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when I paint, everything else is gone. I can't think, or it's so immersed in it that, you know, although the music's on 9 times out of 10, I'm not really paying attention to that either. It's there. But I bet you that when you were young, you used to do your homework with music on.
Yes, I did. Yeah. And I do still listen to music now. And it's not that I don't, it's just that sometimes it's an audiobook.
No, but they have proven, haven't they, that if you have some kind of noise in the background, it helps you do what you're doing to a better degree.
Yes.
It's proven now. Whereas my parents used to say, "Turn that noise off, how can you concentrate?" But, you know, that's the point, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It allows you to kind of, I suppose, not think about everything else.
Yes. Just hone it down. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Actually, the human psyche and how it works.
I'm also fascinated by the speed of painting with different pieces of music. I don't know if you found this. If you've got a very gentle, relaxed piece of music on, my painting's quite slow. But if I then go to put something on that's a bit ramped up, I'm painting like fury. And sometimes you have to go, okay, I think I need to change the track.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Bless them. So apart from David Bellamy, are there any other artists that have really inspired you?
Yeah.
Genres?
Yes, very much so. I mean, going back to people and how they influence us. During the summer holidays, my dad, when I was a kid, I think personally that Mum used to get rid of us for a day, just have a bit of peace and quiet in the day on our own. And Dad and I would always have a day here or there in the summer holidays going up to London to do the museums and to do the art galleries. And that was brilliant, really. You know, I must have been quite young when we first started doing that. And I was always struck by the pre-Raphaelites, even then. And this is where the whole story ethos of my work comes from, because every one of those artists, you know, Millet and Rossetti, they used to paint a story. And to this day, I can still remember standing looking at Ophelia in the water.
Yes.
And the Lady of Shalott. I've got a picture here, I'll show everybody in a minute. And then the other one that got me, of course, was Turner, because there were these great big bizarre splashes of colour, and it was the colour really that used to get me there, you know. So the first one we'll go for, because I spoke about her first. So here you have the Lady of Shalott, and having read the poem at school and been totally devastated by the fact that this lady was locked in a tower on the river looking down towards Camelot, and she'd been told she must not look to Camelot because it would be the death of her. She managed one day while she was spinning to catch sight of Lancelot riding by in a mirror. So she didn't even look, but she saw him in a mirror. And as she stood up from the loom, the mirror cracked from side to side, and she couldn't resist. She got out, she went outside, she laid her finery in the boat, and she set sail, or she just floated down to Camelot. She couldn't stop herself. And of course, it was the death of her. She laid in the boat and she died. And this picture is her knowing, I mean, look at her face. She knows what fate awaits her, but she's still going to go towards it, embrace it.
And the picture of her is stunning, but not just the picture of her, the landscape, the proportions, the composition, the whole thing is just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is Lizzie Siddal, and she was also the model for the Ophelia piece where she was lying in the water. Yes. And they reckon that that particular painting had something like 130, 140 botanical species in it. You know, wow. He really went to town. And to this day, that painting's used by botanists today to see what was available in the countryside in that era.
So, isn't that amazing?
Oh God. Right, okay. So the next one would be this one. See what you make of this. What do you think of that?
Wow, that's a stunner.
This is Karol Bach, and he is a Polish artist, and he paints women quite exclusively, and they all have this wing theme going on and this circular feel and the kind of headdress, if not halo. And I've just never met anybody like him who can paint like this.
That's really impressive.
This just makes me want to throw my paintbrushes on the floor and tread on them. I just love his work. Love it.
Absolutely stunning.
Love one in the house. So.
Well, I can show you somebody who inspires me in a similar way and also makes me want to throw my brushes down on the floor. Let me find it.
Show me.
So here we have a painting. This is a detail from a painting by Deborah Walker. She's a Royal Society of Marine Artists painter.
This is a painting?
That's a painting, yes.
Oh!
It's watercolor, and her paintings are huge. I mean, they are 3 foot, 4 foot in size. They're absolutely massive, and they are watercolor. And I just find it so impressive.
I'm not surprised.
I
Oh
have
my.
There's another one.
Oh, they're exquisite, aren't they?
Aren't they just? But that makes me it makes me want to try harder. So it's inspiring in as much as it makes you want to try harder, and it makes you want to run away.
Yes, exactly. Good. Oh, the thoughts of all the ripples on the water and the colours in the water and the crisscross effect are just amazing.
So yeah, Deborah Walker. I find her work incredible.
She's brilliant, isn't she?
Yes. But I've also been inspired by the Impressionists. And what I like about them is how you get, it's less detailed, which is where I'm heading towards anyway, but it is also, it's the shimmer that they have, because they're not trying to blend everything together. They're putting two colours side by side so that they shimmer. And I find that fascinating. And I don't necessarily want to be impressionist in the way that they were, but I'm fascinated by how they did what they did.
Yeah, yeah. And trying to achieve that effect.
Yeah. Yeah, with just a few colours and a canvas. So, well, I have found that absolutely fascinating. And I think we both have very strong maternal influences, which is precious. And we both have, I think, I certainly feel that I have a wide range of influences. It's not one thing that influences me. It's a little bit of this and a little bit of that and this person and that person. And they all make me want to try and be better. And I also think, just going to throw something in here, the Artist Demo Days, which we are both a member of, to me has given me so much inspiration over the last year during lockdown.
Yes.
They have made me want to continue painting, because I think it would have been very easy to not bother.
Well, yes, because and a lot of people indeed have thrown the gauntlet or thrown their brushes down, haven't they, and decided that they've lost their inspiration and their mojo and it's not there anymore. And I must admit, because of Artist Demo Days, it's swept me along in the enthusiasm, because something we need to point out to people is if you're being creative, if you are being creative, it creates creativity.
Yes.
You know, as you're working, you're thinking, oh, I could just do that in a different way. Or what happens if I do that with such and such instead? And I would say to everybody, with inspiration, it's a very fluid thing. And we sometimes go to bed with an idea, but by the time we wake up in the morning with every good intention in the world, it's gone. And so have that piece of paper or use your phone just for a voice note. You know, press it and leave your voice note so that you can remember the next day what you were thinking about. It's fleeting, it's gone. I have a book here, and this is my notes book. And in that are all the bits and pieces that I think of as I think of them. So write it down. Don't let it escape you. Titles of paintings even. Yes.
Yes, even if you haven't done the painting, you've got a title that you know you're going to use at some point. But yeah, no, the Artist Demo Days has been a fantastic thing for me over the last 12 months, not least of all because it means we have got back in touch with one another in a much closer way than we ever had been.
Yes.
But every time one of us has had a wobble, at least one other has been there. And for me, that has been inspirational.
Yeah. Yes, and that's what we need in difficult times like this, isn't it? Somebody else there just to pick up the pieces on the bad days.
Yeah, because we're all going to have them. We're all going to have them. Well, I think we have gone on for longer than I expected, but I think that's because there is so much that inspires us that I don't think there's anything wrong with having gone on and on and on about what does inspire us.
And of course, we'd like to hear what inspires you too.
Crikey, yes, absolutely. Please leave comments. Tell us the things that you agree with. Tell us the things that you disagree with. That's fine.
Yeah. But until next time, why don't you
dip into our conversation?